That was lovely. What makes a church a church? Is it the people, the leadership, fellowship, the music, the building, the money, communion, the ministries, the worship, the minister, the adults, the missions, the beliefs, the Bible, the committees, the meetings, or even just Jesus? Does the church even matter today? Is it relevant? Is it needed? Some say that if a pastor is not nervous about his or her job prior to preaching a sermon, then they are not preaching God's message. So as we begin this message for the third week of Lent, let's take a moment to look back at the previous two messages. The first one reminded us to take Sabbath, to not be tempted by unfaithful voices, but instead we must stop, rest, and be patient, so that we are prepared to do what God's voice is calling us to do. Now, last week we talked about the life cycle of the church, and we are able at a point in this church to possibly really revision, rethink, and redo things. And I have true belief that we are able to do that revisioning, but to do so means, like we talked about last week, we must dream in heavenly concepts and not be limited to the concepts of the human church. One of the most controversial discussions facing the church are discussions around the building. Like the fruit tree, we must find ourselves asking the question, do we kill it or do we wait one more year? What is the future for this building? Initially, that question kind of makes me feel like a meteorologist. All the information and computers and science point to the fact that it may rain, but it still may end up to be a sunny day here in the Midwest where the weather is made up and the seasons do not matter. You never quite know what the weather is going to hold because no one can actually predict the future. Even within this parable today, it is filled with hope and grace. But it does not actually answer whether or not the tree produced fruit the following year. We do not know if one more year made a difference or not. It may have made all the difference. We don't know. Because, see, ultimately the question is not about the tree, just like the question really isn't about the building. The question is about fruit. Last week I asked you to answer this big question. If you had all the money and time in the world and knew you couldn't fail, what ministry would you provide? And we lifted up some of the amazing ministries that this building does provide. The food pantry, the rummage sale, a gathering point for several meals throughout the community, reaching out to our schools and being able to help families in needs. And it even invites people in to use the facility through our renters. And of course, it provides us a wonderful place to worship on Sunday mornings. All of these are ways that we can see this building and this place as an asset. The question becomes, is this enough? Is this enough fruit? Now, when I ask the question, is it enough, are there any of you in here who automatically think financially? Well, I did not ask the question, is the building financially enough? When we traditionally think about a church building, we all of a sudden become people who imply that we need to pay our bills and fix things. But the question really shouldn't be, is it financially enough? The question should be, is our building helping us respond to God's call? Is it helping us worship and learn and respond to the needs of God's people in our community and even beyond? Are we enhancing what we do well? Are we seeking the other passions that God is calling our hearts to provide? And to do that, we must, of course, continue during this time of preparation to figure out what God is calling us to do at this time. We are continuing in this time of Lent to prepare. And as we prepare, we must be realistic and think about the building. Does it allow us the flexibility to be God's people in different ways at different times? Or has our ministry become the building, a limitation, a liability? Because buildings will ultimately crumble and collapse. So we must ask ourselves, what is the legacy we want our faith to hold? How do we move with the people when buildings cannot move? How do we reach beyond the building when buildings so often segregate more than integrate? You see, many church buildings seem to be limiting God's movement because at some point church buildings start to be seen as the fruit when really they are supposed to be like the tree and provide the fruit. And because this has happened, many of the younger generations have responded by seeing beyond the building and leaving it and not coming back in. They do not see the work of Jesus there, but the work of people trying to save a building, not save God's people. Relevant Magazine has an article by Carl Jones that reminds us that buildings limit our ministries for several reasons. First, it allows us to compartmentalize our faith. Our faith happens at church once a week. Our jobs happen in another building. Our family happens over here. Our activities happen here. Seeing the church as a place actually isolates the church, when the point of being church is to incorporate and to respond. Some would then say, and I would say, that the building allows us to be community with one another in this place, but it can also become a boundary that limits movement and invites other people from the community in. It limits community call and spirit. You see, we must find a way to make the world a sacred place of love, not just a building. This isn't just God's house. Outside of those doors is God's world. All is sacred. You see, as we approach the 50-year anniversary of this building, we do currently, I double-checked, have $15,000 to update the building. I would not be doing my job as a pastor called to be a prophet without asking the tough question. Why? What other ministries could you provide, reach, respond, and do with $15,000? Is spending the money on the building the faithful response? Last week, I reminded you that many people in our world live on less than $1.25 a day. Imagine what $15,000 could do. Or as we continue to support We Cook Compassion, 3.4 million people die each year from water-related diseases. You can help through Church World Service drill 1 meter of shallow well water for $30 and give clean water around the world to those who need it. That would be 500 wells for $15,000. And while at first that seems kind of black and white, we know that discussions about the building are not black and white. Beyond the emotional attachments, a building can provide us space. And space can help us do God's work. Space can be the place where we worship and learn and live out our faith. We just must be smart enough to get so comfortable that our space isn't flexible and welcoming and open. We can't love the building more than God's call. We can't love the building more than God. San Bernardino Christian Church in California had this beautiful building, but the building was taking all of their money and limiting their ministry. So they moved. It was not an easy process, but it was a faithful response that I watched that community use and go through. I feel about this building some ways the same ways I feel about you already. It's really quite charming and lovely, and it feels like a home. But it needs a little love and a little cleaning, and we got some cobwebs, and it needs a little vision. And my goal at this point is to celebrate the 50-year anniversary. I'm even hoping to start to put together ideas of 50 ways to update little things, big things, things that truly celebrates this building, because this building has a purpose and is worthy of spending $15,000, not because of its history and what it meant to us in the past, but because we are visioning and seeking and looking at how ministry can be done in the future. So the question is actually the same for the building as it was for us last week. If you had all the money and time in the world and knew you couldn't fail, what ministry can the building serve so that we can reach beyond its walls? You see, a church building is similar to a gas station. While sometimes it's okay to hang out and have coffee there, it is a place that refuels you to go back into the world and invites others in who need to be fueled. Of course, we don't have all the money in the world, but we have a God of grace. We have hope, and we actually have all the skills and time and energy that we need in this room. I truly believe that. So we stand in some ways kind of like the barren fig tree. And yet I am not ready like the servant to cut it down. Instead, I'm ready to give it some thought, some love. Let's say, like the story, we have one more year, maybe two. If the church building is the tree and the fruit comes from the tree, what is our job? What do we do to make the fruit grow? There's a quote that says, "When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower." So here's what we have to do. As this parable tells us, we have to dig in the dirt and make a mess in the manure. We are called to be servants, not the master. No one said faith is easy. We are called to get messy, but it can be so exciting. It can be exciting to bring faithful fruit into the world. But you have to be excited enough to get your hands dirty. We have to prune and we have to weed and grow. And we also must trust in God's grace and hope the weather works in our favor. We must, as we heard today from Ben, be patient and trusting. You see, it isn't about the building, it's about the fruit. This building providing fruit worthy of its cost. Do others see its fruit? And if not, how do we change the environment? And most importantly, why? What fruits are we called to provide? Reverend Ben Boren has changed the children's version of Here is the Church. And Sharon Watkins, our general minister and president, has shared that with many people. Because next time you say, let's go to church, I want you to remind yourselves that you already are at church. Because you're the church. The church isn't the building. You are already there, and you are part of God's mission. It's not a compartmentalized place, but it's a place that you are always a part of. So here's how it goes. Here's the church with prayer and with vision. Open the doors, go out in God's mission. So you're going to do that with me now. You ready? Here we go. Here's the church with prayer and with vision. Open the doors, go out in God's mission. That's the building and the church. The building is to provide the fruit so that we can go out and do God's mission. You are the church, not the building.